Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. I'm about to bake bread, so I thought I would record it because I should try and take some photos to share it as well. Now, I prefer sourdough. I like the texture of it. I like that it lasts a little bit longer than a standard yeasted bread, but most of the kids prefer softer bread, as kids do. So I've been working on trying to get a sandwich type bread, but in sourdough. Now, the problem is that at the moment it's too hot. That's basically it. Sourdough likes to proof at like max of sort of 27, 28 degrees. They say that once it gets above 32, then it's detrimental. So I have my fancy temperature probes, and what I did is I've been measuring the temperature of the dough as it's proofing and things like that, and some days here it's getting up to 34, 35, and it means that as it's proofing too fast and all the structure is breaking down before it has a chance to create enough of a workable dough. So then when we're cooking it, it's just collapsing and it's ending up dense and not very nice. So we're putting that back on the back burner again for a little bit until we get some better daytime temperatures. But what I want to do is I want to keep my starter going because I spent a couple of weeks getting it really nice and healthy again. So the plan is to keep that going. So we're making sourdough discard, is what they call it, sandwich bread. Now, it's basically just sandwich bread, and we're replacing a little bit of the flour and the water with some starter, just so that it's constantly being used, which means I'm constantly feeding the starter, which is just keeping it really nice and healthy so that when we get a spat of cooler days, it's there. So I actually have some in the fridge starter that I haven't used for a few days. I put it in the fridge because it wasn't working and I was a bit frustrated. But I have been making sandwich bread. So I'll put a photo in here. I've made some loaves over the past few days. I sliced up some to share today that was yesterday's loaf, so I'll put a little clip in here of that too to show you what it looks like the second day round of slicing. So this is just a fairly basic sandwich bread. It's not much different to anyone else's, but everyone puts their own spin of things on these. So I actually have some new stainless steel bread tins on the way so that I can flip them so that there's one on top of the other and they're a bit like using a Dutch oven. I don't have them yet. So I'm just using whatever I have available, but that's what we've been cooking in. So I just thought I'd share that. I'm trying to get into the habit of making this bread more regularly because it just makes it easy for lunches for the kids to have bread available when there's no wraps left and stuff like that at this point of the grocery period. So let's get started. All right, so we're using the KitchenAid because that's a nice, easy thing to do, especially when we're using lots of dough. So this is my starter. It's been in the fridge. It fell before I put it in the fridge because I forgot it was out. So it's very flat, not much in the way of any sort of bubbles or anything, but we're just using this as an add-in. We're not using it as a leavening agent. We're going to use yeast. So I do a fairly simple dough. As I said, it's not going to be much different to everyone else's, but we're just going to share. So I like to make about 3 loaves at a time, and so I start off with 900 grams of water, about 300 grams a loaf. You could split some of this into milk if you wanted to. So we've got 900 grams of water. We're going to put in 100 grams of starter, and we're going to add a tablespoon of yeast. You can use up to 2 tablespoons of yeast in this size dough, but with the temperatures that we have, I find that if I overdo it, it gets too puffy too quickly and the dough ends up a little bit crumbly. So we are going to add some sugar to this as well, which is just 50 grams. You can add honey, you can add raw sugar, you can add maple syrup, any sort of something just to help that yeast to activate, but it will also help with the browning of the bread when you cook it. So I'm just using raw sugar because it's the cheapest thing for me to use. Like honey is like $10 a kilo and raw sugar is $1.60. So for me, it makes more sense just to use sugar. So I'm just using 50 grams of sugar across those 3 loaves of bread. We're going to add 1200 grams of flour and I'm just using Costco's baker's flour. So we've got 1200 grams of flour. We're going to use some salt, and we're going to use some fat. So I'm just going to use ghee because it's nice and easy to use. It's already liquid. You could use oil if you wanted. You could use butter, whatever it is that you wanted to use. Melted is going to make it easier for it to blend through the dough. It's not like a pastry. You don't really want chunks of, you know, hard butter. It's better off if it was melted. So I was just mixing up some of the solids there. So we just do 50 grams of fat of choice, oil, butter, whatever. And then we're going to add some salt. I think my salt jar is empty as per usual. I need to fill that up. All right, and we're going to use about a tablespoon of salt. About 15, 20 grams. Just like that. And then I'm going to mix it up. So I've got my KitchenAid. I'm going to grab my dough hook. All right, so the goal here is to get a slightly sticky dough, but not so sticky that it's unmanageable. This is a hard one. It's a hard thing to explain because it's a slightly enriched dough, because it's got that fat and stuff in there, because my temperatures are really hot, and because the quality of the flour that I use is just Costco flour, which isn't a particularly high quality flour. The water and flour ratios can vary. So let's get this one out. All right, so this is still pretty sticky, but it's not excessively sticky, okay? So what you're aiming for is a dough that yeah, when you put your finger on it, you get a bit of a residue, but not so much that it's like covering the surface that you've put it on. If it's too sticky, add some flour. So I would say that you could add up to another sort of 150 grams of flour to this if needed. So I did 1200 to start with, and I put a couple of tablespoons in just to get the texture right. It really depends on your flour. Or you could drop your water in the beginning. Bread it's really hard because when it's cold, the same recipe may work perfectly, and then when it's hot, it doesn't. Because the humidity, the ambient temperature, the batch of flour that you're using, all these things can impact how the dough comes together. So the best bet is to start with the recipe amount, which is what I do. I start with that amount every time, and then I have a look. And so yes, it's sticky, but it's not covering my fingers, and I call that good. So I did add a couple of tablespoons. I turned the camera off, I didn't realize. I did add a couple of tablespoons of flour to this as it was needing, because it was just a little too sticky. But I still want it a little bit sticky because it's sandwich bread. So we want it to be moist, and we want it to be a tight crumb and things like that. So this is the goal for texture wise. It will take a little bit to, you know, get yourself to the point where you can assess the dough and make sure that it's exactly what you want. So I've got a Cambro container here to put my dough into, and then all I do is I use my little handy dandy scraper thing, because the dough is that little bit sticky. You want something to scrape it out of the bowl. I've got the camera a bit close to me at the moment too, but you get the gist of it. All right, so we just scrape as much out of that bowl as possible and put it all in here. And what we end up with in this container is just under the 2-quart mark. So we tend to find that it's just under the 4-quart mark is when it doubles. So I'm going to put the lid on this one and put it aside to proof. Okay, so part of the reason that I'm wanting sandwich bread as well is because it's a bit like the porridge type, the fridge porridge and things like that. It's a little bit about the independence of the kids being able to prepare their own meals. I'm more than happy to cook for them, and I do a large quantity of time. I'm happy to make porridge for them during the of a morning, especially in winter. We do hot porridge and stuff like that, but I also want them to have the ability to serve themselves. So Darryl's actually in Toowoomba today, and one of the things he's going to do, he's grabbing, is one of those stovetop jaffle makers. So if we've got sandwich shaped bread, then they can make jaffles. So the other thing I'm going to do today while I'm waiting for the bread to proof that is I'm going to make some of my cheese. This cheese is semi-solid spreadable, so they can put it on the sandwich with ham or tomato or whatever they want, and then they're going to put it in the jaffler. So that's the plan. I have a cup of cashews in some water on the stove that are boiling, that I'm bringing up to a boil at the moment. I'm going to bloom some gelatin. I thought my gelatin was here, but it's not. So let me find it. Here we go. Now I'm getting pretty low on gelatin, mind you. I should buy some more. So we're going to put in, let me check my notes. We're going to do 4 tablespoons of gelatin because we're doing a double batch of this cheese, because I find that it's easier to make it in larger batches all at once, and my kids go through it pretty quick. But also I find the smaller a quantity that you're putting in the Thermomix or a food processor sometimes, the harder it is to get it smooth. So by doing the larger quantity, I find that helps. So I've got 4 tablespoons of gelatin in this bit of water. With that amount of gelatin, I probably should have got a bit of extra water, but it should be fine. We're high. Oh, no, I'm making a mess. Let me grab a slightly larger bowl. We'll top this up to a cup, and that way I'll know exactly how much liquid I've used there. Of course, I'm short on water too. Even things I make all the time and I've pretty much mastered, I can't seem to get to run smoothly on film, no matter what I do. So, now, lucky I washed my bench. So that was a cup of water with that bit of gelatin, and we're going to get this so that hopefully there's no lumps in it, nice and hydrated. Alright, so my cashews have been boiling for a few minutes, which is normally more than enough, especially when I'm using a high-powered blender like the Thermomix to then bring it all together. So we've got a cup of cashews that have been boiled. I'm just straining them off so that I can use the liquid as well. So a cup of cashews, I'm going to stick them straight into the Thermomix jug. Alright, now liquid wise we want 3 cups of water all up. So this was a cup, and I'm actually going to pour this into this hot water, see if I can get a couple of those lumps that I created by poorly guessing the size of the to blend up. Alright, so we're going to put 3 cups of water all up. Move you up a bit. 3 cups of water all up in here as well. 1, 2, and we'll top this up. 3. Alright, so we've got 3 cups of water in there as well. Okay, now let's bring it a bit closer. Okay, next thing, we need some nutritional yeast. We're going to use half a cup of nutritional yeast. Might need to find my other bag of this. That's about half a cup. So we've got half a cup of nutritional yeast. We're going to add some lemon juice, which is going to end up being about a quarter of a cup. So this is a half cup. I'm going to measure out about a quarter of a cup of that. This is a little bit easy to just go with flavor, like this is to taste. So to a degree you can play with these a little bit. We're going to use some tahini, which adds some lovely flavor and texture into it. Now tahini separates, so I just need to get a spoon to mix that in, or a fork because kids haven't done dishes yet. So I'm just going to combine some of that oil with the solid so that we get a mix of both. Sometimes warming it up helps with that, but it's awfully warm today, so it surprises me. So what we want is around about a quarter of a cup of tahini. So which might end up being most of what's left in this jar anyway. Let's have a look. Yeah, so pretty much the end of that jar was 1/4 cup, so we put 1/4 cup of tahini in there. We're going to use some paprika because I like the smoky flavour, but also it gives good colour. So we're going to use about a tablespoon of paprika. And then you can add spices and stuff how you like. Onion, garlic, salt, mustard, things like that. What I find that works really well is Vegeta, because Vegeta has MSG and stuff in it. And so it's got the onion, it's got the garlic, it's got the MSG, it's got the umami. So I'm going to put a tablespoon of that in there. And then I am going to put some dried mustard would be good if I knew where my dried mustard was. One sec. All right, I have some mustard seeds here in my little spice jar, so I'm just going to blend them up into a powder, just like that. And then I'm just going to add probably 1/2 teaspoon of these. This will just give it a little bit more flavor boost, a little bit of warmth as well, and it just works really well. One day my kitchen will be organized and I'll know where everything is, and these videos might end up a little less all over the place, but anyway. So we got mustard in there. Now, I'm not going to add salt yet because the Vegeta has some salt in it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to blend this up. I'm going to scrape it down. I'm going to give it a taste. And then we shall see. All right, I'm going to start low and take it up high. That was 30 seconds to start with. Again, as I've been saying, you know, one day my kitchen will be sorted and I'll know where my lids are and things like that too. But anyway, so now because this doesn't have any starch in it, like no tapioca or anything like that, which is what I use for some of my stretchy sauces, it doesn't need cooking, it just needs blending, and it will just be a liquid, but the gelatin is what will set it up. So it's just a liquid. We're just going to try and get it as smooth as possible. We could then cook it, though gelatin doesn't like too high temperatures, so this isn't really one for cooking. This is one for this sort of a purpose, so we'll leave it at that. Hey, we'll discuss the other ones another time. This is purely for them to be able to put on toasted sandwiches. So I'm going to blend this up again. It's pretty good, but I'm going to give it like a whole minute at 10 just to get it really, really nice and smooth, and then we're going to find something to pour it into. All right, so that was an added minute, and look at the color and the texture of that. It's fantastic. Now, something you could do differently with this recipe if you wanted, you can see it is sort of thickening up a little bit already too. Something you could have done differently with this recipe too is instead of using the cashew water, you could use coconut cream. That works as well, but it is pretty creamy on its own, and doesn't really, this particular one doesn't really need that extra creaminess, because just look at the consistency of it. I tend to use coconut cream on ones that I'm not using nuts with, and if I'm using nuts, then I find the soaking water works really well. So this is just a lovely texture. So we're going to find a container to put this in. All right, I'm going to go with this large glass container. It's not going to be particularly thick, but I think it just takes too long to set if it's too thick for a start. But I think that this will end up thick enough to cut some slices off anyway, but still thin enough that it should set up and not too slow. So you can put it in whatever shape you want, really. You could do it in small little mini molds, and then you'd have just these small balls of it each. It really depends, and it kind of depends on how well it sets up. Sometimes this sets up really well, and you can actually, you know, use a knife to slice it. Other times I find it's a bit softer and it's more using a knife to spread it. So we'll see how this one turns out. Part of that's the brand of the gelatin you use. Sometimes it's just the heat that it gets mixed at. It's a little bit temperamental, this recipe. So as much as I can give you the ratios for it, it may be a different consistency depending on the brand of gelatin you use, and the measurements, like, because this one's sort of in cups and stuff, which I normally avoid. I normally do everything in weight, but the stuff that we're using in this, it's a lot easier to just have in cups, means that everyone's cup measurements and tablespoon measurements are different. So anyway, this is the cheese that is hopefully going to be solid enough to use for their toasted sandwiches. I'll put it in the fridge, and then I will share this with the bread and the jaffle maker, and we'll see how it goes. All right, now one of the boys has been asking, I think it's Lorcan, has been asking for cinnamon scrolls for days, and I just haven't got around to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn one of these loaves of bread into cinnamon swirl bread, because that dough's nearly ready to go. It makes 3 loaves, so one of the loaves I'm going to turn into that. I'm going to do really, really simple. I'm going to use some ghee, a scant half cup of ghee, about 100 grams of ghee. You can use any butter or whatever that you want to use there. And I'm going to do some sugar. Now this is for the kids only, so we're just going to use standard sugar. I need another measuring cup. I don't have any brown sugar made up at the moment, so I'm just going to use my raw sugar. We're going to go with probably a cup. If I don't use all of this, some of it can go in the fridge. And I can use it on the next loaf of bread that I do. And I'm going to add some molasses just because I don't have any brown sugar. And then we're going to add some cinnamon. And we're going to be generous with that. Oh, that's paprika, not cinnamon. That would be a bad idea. Well, it's cinnamon, but it's not. Here we go. Cinnamon, we're going to do 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, because I really, not that I'm the one eating it, but I really like it to be nice and strong. I'm just going to grab a fork or something, and I'm just going to mix that up. There you go. And we've just got sort of this paste. Now, a finer grained sugar would give it a smoother paste and all the rest of it, but it's going to be baked in the bread and it should be fine. It should dissolve enough that it's not as gritty. And basically I'm being lazy. So, that's done. Now, let's get ready to split this bread up. So here we go. It's up between the 2 and the 4. This is going to have another proof in the tin, so we don't want to let it go too far because we're going to knock it down and then put it in the tins, because it's yeasted, of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little bit of flour. Of course, my mic wasn't on for all of that, which is great. Now it's on, but that other stuff's going to be... Anyway, and we're just going to tip all this. Now this dough is still a little bit tacky because it's a soft dough. So I'm going to scrape it all out into here. Now this should end up being around about 3 800-gram loaves. All right. Okay, so all I'm going to do is get it all into one pile. I'm using a bit of flour and the scraper to create a little bit of a non-stick external part to it, just to make it easier to handle. Like that. And then I like to measure it out just so that each tin is going to be a similar size, which makes for similar cooking times. So what I tend to do is I tend to cut it and bring it up to around about the 800. What I'm going to do is bring this one together, sort of like a pre-shape that I do for sourdough, basically just to give myself some room. Same thing with this one. We're just bringing it into a bit of a pre-shape, sort of a ball just to get it out of the way. Grab my tins. Alrighty, I've got my cast iron loaf tins at the moment. I'm going to oil it a little bit. Alright, now all I'm going to do is really super simple shaping. All I do is I spread them out, bring it in, and God, the flies, my God. Roll it up, and then I generally do the other way as well. Roll it like that, and then place it in the tin, just like that. And then we're going to leave these to proof again. So I'm going to do the same with the second one, bring it all in and just get a bit of a skin on it. Roll it like that, and then I 180 degree it and just tuck that up as well, just like that. And a little bit of oil in my cast iron pan and placed in there. Now I have disposable shower caps which I reuse as many times as I can, and they fit well on these tins, so that's just going to sit aside until it fills those pans. And then we have just one more. Now I'm going to put a little bit more flour on the board because this one's going to be the swirl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread this out. About the width of the loaf tin, and then we're going to be generous with this and spread it out. I don't reckon I need the whole lot for this size loaf. I reckon I can refrigerate half of it for the next one. A little bit of flour in it's not going to hurt. If anything, sometimes adding a little bit of flour or cornstarch to your cinnamon mix stops it from falling out when you're making like cinnamon scrolls where the bits are exposed. For this it's not such an issue because we're going to pinch the ends closed anyway, so it should stay in the bread regardless. So we're just going to be generous because it is going to be pinched in. Alright, now I'm actually going to spin this around because I should have left the empty end closest to me. Now, I don't have another cast iron tin, and I'm out of baking paper at the moment. So I'm using this enamel one. It sticks a little bit, but it should be fine. And all I'm going to do is roll this up, tuck any bits that fall out in it like this, and I'm going to pinch the ends so that it's going to stay in there, and just plop it in like that. Try and pinch the seam as well, like that. And I'm going to put Glad wrap on this one because the shower caps don't fit on this tin. So I'm going to put some Glad wrap on this one, put that with the other one to proof, and then I'll come back when they're ready to bake. Alright, so the dough has filled the tins. Now, if this was straight sourdough, not yeasted, I probably would have put this in the fridge a little bit before this point and left it in the fridge for the night and baked tomorrow. But because this is yeasted, this is a same day bake, and you can same day bake sourdough as well, but I just like the way it works with a fridge retard. So we've let it fill the tins. I've preheated the oven to 180 and it will take around about 30 minutes at 180. Now, again, if it was sourdough, it probably wouldn't be quite this full when I stuck it in the fridge, and when I pulled it out, I'd score it because it's going to puff up more. But I don't find that yeasted bread really needs to be scored because it's already gotten to that point. So we're going to stick this in the oven for 30 minutes. So this is the bread fresh out of the oven. Now, as something, you don't have to do it, but something that we tend to do for sandwich type breads, just to keep it nice and soft, is we spread some melted butter. So I've got some ghee here and just a pastry brush, and all I'm doing is just putting a coating of melted butter over the crust, which gives it a nice shine, but also keeps the crust nice and soft. Just like that. Now I'm going to let it sit in the pans for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'll put them out on a rack and I'll take a photo and we'll see what they look like. Alright, so the cheese is set up. Now ideally I would have put baking paper on this to like slide it out, except that I'd run out of baking paper. So Darryl got me some more today, but I didn't have any. So I'm just going to take some out to show you. So I'm just going to take slice it like this and take hopefully there we go. So this is what the cheese ends up looking like, all right? So what the idea is that it's sliceable. So we can then grab a knife and cut it into melty, slicey bits. Sonnet wants to try some. Just like this. And then we can put it on toasted sandwiches. Tasty? Too tasty. Sonnet says good. So what the plan is I'm going to slice this piece up into these pieces, and then I'm going to cut some bread up, and I'm going to do them tomato soup for dinner with grilled cheese sandwiches. So this is the cheese to go on there, toasted sandwiches, and then we've got a loaf of bread from today's bake. So bread knife would be good. And the plan is that we will try out the stovetop jaffle maker. So that's today's bread. We got this, and we're going to put some cheese on here.
Bread's good too.
And then I'm going to brush the bread with a little bit of ghee, just like that. And I have the stovetop jaffle maker that I got from Kmart, so we're going to give this just a quick spray, and then the idea is that we can put I'm not showing very well because this, for some reason the monitors, hang on, just must have it lined up differently to normal. So anyway, I'm going to do a second one so that we can cook two at the same time, and we're going to try cooking these. I might heat this slightly before I stick the sandwiches in there. So I'm going to stick this on the stove, warm it up, and we'll see how we go. So we're just warming it up, and then we're going to just place. And the idea is that the kids, whichever way, the kids can do this for themselves is the idea. And then we're just going to squish it.
Close it.
And let it heat up, and we'll flip it and we'll see how it goes. And I've just got a jar of canned tomato soup from the shelf. It's in an old ghee jar that's been canned. I'm going to put a tin of coconut cream in it and some chicken stock and warm that through, and then they can have some pasta in it if they want.
Yes.
So we might get some like macaroni pasta or something to put in it.
Got this on at the bottom.
It's fine, it's just from popcorn.
Yeah, it's like brown.
Chicken stock pods that were from one of the hampers at some point, so they're just like a concentrate. If we're going to do pasta in it, we might have to bump the liquid content up a little bit too. Could probably toast them a little bit longer by the looks of it, but if you look inside, all the cheese is melted, which is the goal. So we'll give Sonnet a taster since she's helping. Hot. I reckon they need to be toasted a bit longer.
That'll just be my sandwich.
Tasty? Does it need a bit more cheese on it?
Yes.
So the consensus is that it's tasty, but it could probably do with a bit more cheese to bread ratio, and that's probably because the bread's cut a bit thick because I'm hand cutting it and it's still warm. So, you know, it's much easier to cut bread thin once it's cooled, but it just didn't work out timing wise. So we'll do another set, and we'll do them with a bit more cheese. And this is the cinnamon roll. Swirl bread. Look at that. I served up dinner last night, and only now when I'm editing this morning did I realise that I forgot to even close it out. So by the time all of that was done and I served up, and that was it. So the kids had the tomato-based spaghetti noodles. They remind me a little bit of tin spaghetti, the texture, and they really like it like that, which I find is really strange. But at least it's a whole lot more nutrient dense than tin spaghetti, I suppose. So they had that with the toasted cheese fingers. They really enjoyed that. So I'm looking forward to the ability to cut that bread up nice and thin once it's cold, and then put it aside, and they can make their own ham, cheese, tomato, or banana, cheese and bacon is a favoured toasted sandwich, all that sort of thing in the jaffle toasters for lunches or breakfasts or whatever they want. That's something that I can do more for them to do. I could even potentially freeze the sandwiches. So even if I bought, I'm standing in ants. Something must have been spilt on my kitchen floor. Now I need to clean it. Even if I buy, when I go to Costco, they have bread pretty cheap. Even if I buy a couple of loaves of just bread from Costco and make it all into ham cheese sandwiches or something, and freeze it all as ham cheese sandwiches, and then they can make their own toasted sandwiches from that straight out of the freezer. So that will give me something else that is, again, a somewhat independent meal for them to use for the times when I just don't feel like waiting on them, because I cook an awful lot for them, but it's really nice to occasionally have something they can prepare for themselves. So that was the cheese, the bread, the new jaffle maker. I will get the bread and cheese along with the Biscoff nut butter and the date caramel up on the website by over the next couple of days. It's all working on that. I just need a couple of photos and it's nearly done. So they will all go up on the website by Sunday. I'll let you know on Sunday when I do my Sunday chat video. We also got the 3 new rescue kittens yesterday afternoon, which is probably why I ended up not finishing filming. So I'll show them off to you on Sunday as well. At the moment they're very timid, so a little bit feral. That's what happens when you take on slightly older rescue kittens, but it's kind of fun to bring them around. So that's it for me, and I will see you guys on Sunday.